Time to talk music, audio gear, and anything else that crosses our minds. I'm Mark.
And I'm Peter.
And welcome to the Hurton Audio Podcast. So, this weekend we have seen the 1975 still at their very best live. And we saw them in Scotland, in Glasgow. So it was a pretty cool trip. And what I will say is the 1975, if you haven't seen them live, do a very, very good stage show and a very good, well-rounded. I mean, Matt Healy, the singer, refers to it as a play, a stage play. So it's just a really good show, and they have a lot of very good feel-good music, and it's a really good all-round experience, particularly if you like the band.
Yeah, because what they do is they play all the hits like you would expect, but they've got these really, really bizarre bits like Consumption, and then whenever they play I Like America and America Likes Me, they always do something like a bit off kilter with it, which this time was very different to last time as well, on the turf. I don't necessarily want to put loads and loads of spoilers in this for the gig, but I suppose you're going to see them everywhere on like Instagram and stuff anyway, aren't you, really?
Yeah, and it's they just keep building different iterations of the stage show. So what they've done on this one is they've combined the at their very best house, that they have like a full sort of inside sitcom almost like house that they can walk around and sit down on chairs on, which is really different to what you see a lot of bands do for stage design. And then because they're being tracked by cameramen walking around, it gives it on the outer screens, it gives it a real like TV experience whilst you're watching the gig, which is one of the best like aspects about it, particularly if you're sat quite far back. We've been lucky to stand a few times, but this time we were sat at the very back, and it wasn't really a different experience. It was still just as good.
It was a really, really good view. I mean, the Over Hydra in Glasgow is a really, really well-built arena. And you can see the difference when you go to arenas that aren't, like, fantastically laid out and built. And you sit at the back, it's like, oh, no, what are we going to do? Whereas this one was like, well, we're literally touching, like, the back wall, and it was a great view. So no obstructions or anything, which is real nice, because there's nothing worse than getting to a gig and there's like a massive like girder blocking half your view, or you just the seats are so compact that you don't actually you can barely see above people's heads and stuff like that. That's like the worst feeling when you get to a gig, because you're like you paid a lot of money, and a lot of people put a lot of time and effort just simply getting there to be there at a gig like that. So it's a real shame if something does block your view.
Yeah, and the best thing about how open the stage is for the 1975, still at their very best, is that they've got this house that's very open plan, so you're not really being obstructed from seeing what the band are doing at any given time. It also means that they're all doing their own thing. Instead of all being stood on stage normally, a lot of them are tucked away, but like sometimes for songs, they'll just be sat on sofas playing. They'll be watching the TVs that are built in. Like Matt Healy will like deliver vocal lines while staring blankly at himself on the TV. And it gives the full show like a grounding point. But also what they've done on this tour is they've smashed that into a little bit of what their old stage design was. So,
like the Music for Cars stage design, for anybody who goes to see them a lot. That's where that's like the 2019 to 2020 shows.
Yeah, and they've not necessarily got all of the rectangular door LEDs that they've had at times, but what they have got is they've got all the colour and all the like the saturation you'd expect on some of the songs. So when they play like some of them are ballads or some of them are 80s ones, they could really light the sky up in neon pink and stuff. And all the stage around the house, they had like strip lights underneath sofas and on chairs and stuff to make the full stage turn different colours, which is really, really nice.
I thought it was a big improvement on the At Their Very Best tour, because the At Their Very Best tour was a lot more conceptually sound. But again, if you are sat at the back of a massive arena, it doesn't matter how conceptually sound it is. You want screens, and you want lights, because you're so far away. You want the bigger the show, the better, really, for anybody in seated. So I think it was a big improvement on the At The Very Best show, because they're at the very best show, and it's also like they do bits like Consumption, like I said earlier, which is like a bit of a fourth wall break in the show. And Matt Healy addresses some like quite interesting sort of theories in these, like just his personal like musings about, as he said on the show we saw him at, the meta of concert going and the 1975 concerts, and how, at this concert he said that, the final product essentially is what people video. So, even though they're selling an experience, a lot of people see it as these videos that pop up from their friends or people they know on Instagram, and ultimately that becomes, the thing they're selling, not the actual experience of being there, which I thought was a very poignant thought. And I think it's a thought that, it's hard to quantify whether that's a product or not, because, it's like saying, if you take a picture of your salad and put it on the internet, that's a little quote. Is that picture the final product of that salad? I mean, it depends on the user. I
would say what he's sort of hinting at what I got from it was, for anybody who's not there, that is the final product, is the video of it, and that's the almost the advertisement for somebody to say, well, I want to see him on the next day to the tour, I want to see him on the next tour. Because a lot of the time you'll see clips of concerts and you'll go, that looks good, I want to go see that. And then that might be what motivates you to buy tickets. Now, I know a lot of the time the tickets are sold out before anybody gets to video it. So it is hard to say that is what sells the tickets, because most of the time it's completely sold out before the tour even starts. So you can't say, well, the people on the first gig spoiled it, or, got people on the last gig to go, because they've all sold out at the same time, haven't they? But
yeah,
to anybody who's not got tickets, that is what the gig looks like. And it's like a perceived thing. That is what you expect. So if you happen to see a concert footage from somebody who's like absolutely blown out the whites on their phone because they're focused on like something really dark, and you go, I can't see anything, that looks rubbish for seated. Yeah. You're not thinking about what it actually looks like. You're thinking about what it looks like on this phone and how that looks. And then you think, wow, I can't barely see anything. So that's how bright it must be in the venue, but obviously it's the phone.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately what probably is playing on his mind. Sorry, I've got to stop doing this.
What, sneaking little quotes in all the time?
Yeah, because, as you say, a lot of people will see that footage on their friends' like socials, and they'll think, wow, I really want to go next time, or wow, that looks really cool, maybe I should check out this band. But for every person that does that, there's probably somebody who goes, they don't sound very good on that phone speaker in that place, in the stadium. They don't, like you say about the lighting looks washed out, or I can barely see them, is what most people would think, particularly people who aren't concert goers. So there's a duality to each of these points and each of these sort of methods of sharing a band. I mean, I was also on a different tangent. You can go to sites like Setlist FM, and they will tell you every song that's played, because it's collated by the users who go to the concerts. And it's quite interesting with Setlist FM, because equally, you can just be trawling Setlist FM for every day on a tour, and you can almost like put a very, very decent guess out of what the band's going to play at the gig you go to. And obviously, there'll always be upsets. Like, for example, we got some very unexpected songs at the Glasgow show. We got The Birthday Party and Bagsy Not in Net, which was like, Bagsy Not in Net, I don't even know how many times I've played that.
Yeah, I wouldn't know off the top of my head whether they played it on the Notes tour. I think they did, off the top of my head, but it's hard because those 4 electronic songs towards the end of Notes on a Conditional Form, they are, for me, easy to confuse for each other, because a lot of them are very atmospheric. So they played it 13 times in 2013.
And then once so far being this one in 2024. Because their tour's only just started, so we can't really collate the data that well. It's just amazing that something like Setlist FM exists and it's so organised. I mean, this has every single 1975 song, exactly how many times people have, listed they've played them live, which is crazy in itself. But these are sort of like the methods you can go to in terms of either spoiling a gig for yourself, which, you know, I think Setlist FM people can be very guilty of trying to go, I want them to play the songs, you know, that I like.
It's a bit like reading a load of movie reviews before watching the movie, where the plot point's been spoiled, you know who the murderer is, you know who dies, and then you go, right, now I understand what this film is, I can watch it. And then you're like, but none of the surprises there.
Yeah, exactly. The emotional response isn't necessarily there. And, you know, definitely from seeing them a lot of times, there were moments in the show that I could not so much predict, but that I expected. Like If You're Too Shy being one of the main leaders into the what are they called? Is it the greatest hits?
Yeah,
set?
at the very best set. So I was just looking at Robbers, and they've played Robbers over 700 times according to Setlist FM. Which
I'm not surprised. Yeah, so I knew that If You're Too Shy would be the first song in that the very best set. I knew Consumption would pop up, or I thought Consumption would pop up somewhere, and I sort of knew that there was going to be a lot of the songs off Being Funny in a Foreign Language in that first half of the set as well. So it's like, I wouldn't say they're spoilers, but they're expectations. And, you know,
well, the first 5 songs or the first 6 songs is basically what we saw last time.
Yeah,
it's It's like them getting the bulk of the new album out the way, which is actually really nice for them just to do like 6 songs in a row. Because I know some bands go, we'll start with a song off the new album, and then we'll finish with a song off the new album. Oh, well, a lot of the time they finish with the greatest songs, don't they?
Yeah.
But they just like pepper them in near the start and then towards the end of the gig, which is sort of what they've done. But what they've done is they've done like a full section almost, where it's like, this is, because they're all not necessarily the same vibe, but they go very well together. Like if you know the album, it's almost like they're playing that album in full, and then they just halt it and say, we're not doing the last half. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I love the fact that, I don't know if these are the official titles, but I love the fact that the part with Consumption, I Like America, and Jesus Christ 2005, which was another unexpected song. They're all listed as Matty's Nightmare on Setlist FM, which I think is quite funny, because I don't remember that on the other, like it being listed as Matty's Nightmare. The thing is with Discogs, the thing is with Setlist FM is it is user based. So that's the thing you've got to account for when you actually use it as a reference tool. But what I will say from being on it and uploading a set list before, it is very, very accurate, because people will come in there, and if you upload what you think the set list is and you're wrong, people will come in there and change it
it's
immediately.
A bit like a Wikipedia article in that sense, where everybody's fighting to get the right information there.
Particularly for like newer gigs and gigs where people record parts of it on their phone, because I suppose what you can do is, if you take like a 5 to 10 second video of every song in the set, which, you know, it sounds quite intrusive, but it really isn't at these gigs, because everybody's filming everything. And if you film like 5 to 10 seconds and you're good at getting your phone out, you know, stealthily or like unintrusively, it's very easy to do that, even as a note-taking format.
There's a very big difference, I think, to filming clips and just saying, oh, that I've just got that, so I can either post that little picture or that little 15-second bit of the thing to like Instagram or whatever, and then filming, because I have actually seen people just live streaming the gigs on like Facebook Live and stuff like that before,
just like
gigs
for extended periods of time.
And then, you know, like say the worst thing about phone culture at gigs, you know, I like being able to take a little video here and there, but I don't like looking at my phone. And if I have a problem, it's like, right, that's going back in my pocket, I'm watching a show. Do you know what I mean?
I don't have any issues with people taking videos and even videoing themselves occasionally, because I feel like that at this point in this day and age is part of the experience, to say, look, I am here, or this is what I'm looking at. But I know what you're going to say. Continue, Matt.
Well, the thing is what really gets me is when, like, I was watching a Japanese house, and obviously the way phone screens are, a lot of people have them on full brightness.
Yeah.
And it's pitch black in the arena. So when you're sat down looking at the stage and your peripheral vision, you can just see people scrolling through Instagram.
And Wikipedia, though. I can't believe somebody was on Wikipedia.
I get taking a video. I get texting somebody. What I don't get is somebody just blindly just scrolling down their Instagram feed or checking their Snapchat stories. And you're like, the band is on. Like, you've paid for the gig, and 2, you're just ignoring it. It's like going to a cinema and then just watching your phone instead of the the movie. I just don't get that logic. But arguably, they would argue, well, this is the support band and I'm not bothered about watching it.
Which is, I think that's fair, but I also think you're closing yourself off to new experiences. Like we was both saying, we're not super well versed in the Japanese house, but we came away from that wanting to listen to the new album, which we had been slowly checking out before we saw them, just so we knew some of the songs. But definitely, like almost like going, well, we'll buy that album because the songs were really good and the performance was really good as well. And that's the point, you know. The 1975 started out supporting people, you know, like especially in these bigger venues, you know, they didn't just start as a massive headlining act, you know.
Yeah.
And if you ignore all the support acts, you know, you are, you know, actively hindering everybody in the music industry from building up these acts that become your 1975s and the Killers and Muse and bands like that, you know, even down to the newer examples, people like, you know, Dua Lipa and stuff, you know, they have to start somewhere, whether it's in small venues or supporting bigger acts. So, you know, it seems a bit unfair to ignore people just because you don't know who they are.
Obviously, we're talking about like a few people in like a crowd of thousands, but it's just something that you almost can't believe when you see it, and you always see somebody doing it. But like, what I really enjoyed about a lot of the 1975 gigs, but particularly the At the Very Best tours featuring the songs off Being Funny in a Foreign Language, is I feel like Being Funny in a Foreign Language is built to play live.
Yeah.
And you feel like with Looking for Somebody to Love, Happiness, and Oh Caroline in particular, and I'm in Love with You, I suppose, they're super upbeat, really feel good and very concise songs. Like there's not a lot, there's not like a lot of padding in some of the songs, and there's not like extended outros and things like that. It just grooves. And like if they do extend something out or extend an intro out,
say like on Happiness, they tend to give that a bit more live, which is so good. Every time they start it, I'm like, yes.
The like e-piano sort of intro for it is immaculate.
Yeah.
It's really, really good. Like it's a really very good addition. Like I think it's very hard to look at the 1975 live and take those 4 songs out and say, now do another, you know, like concert after you've got used to having them, because they feel very much like a big part of the set. And I suppose they are touring that album, and when they have another album, they'll probably take 3 of those songs out and you might not hear them as much. Because like bands do, they always play a good chunk of the new album.
Well, I thought it was very odd how many songs they played off notes on a conditional form on this one, and they didn't play a lot of the singles either. You know, they didn't play the Me and You Together song.
Oh, yeah.
And they didn't play Frail State of Mind either.
No.
So they played like a lot of songs off notes, but they didn't play songs that they would normally play off notes, which I thought was, you know, they played People and stuff as well. But what I'm saying is, you know, that they really, really mixed up that album set. And I think it's because that album wasn't out, was it? It wasn't out when they did the Notes on Conditional Form tour, being Music for Cars Part 2, essentially.
Well, did it come out after? Oh, yeah,
because If You're Too Shy wasn't out, was it? So the rest of the album couldn't have been out.
Yeah, because when we saw them do If You're Too Shy the first time, we had to wait like a good few months. So I think it was more than a month to wait for the song to come out. And that was seeing it live.
Still the singles. So because the Birthday Party came out the week we saw them, didn't it? So the album won't have come out till later in the year. So they probably, you know, then they didn't have chance really to play them songs that much on At the Very Best, because, you know, they were showcasing more material, and I think they wanted a more focused set. But it looks like this time they've really just gone in and played a load of deep cuts off that album. In particular, to me, it's not like they played like that album in full or anything. Also, that album's got a lot of songs on, but it definitely was more of that album than I was expecting. Because what you typically find at gigs and in tours in general is that if they've got 6 albums out and they're touring the 6th album, the 5th album is going to be the album that gets left behind because they just toured that one. You know, that's what normally happens. They
tend to cut a lot of the middle albums out. You'll get a lot from the debut in most cases, unless the debut album was a flop.
Yeah.
And then it'll be a lot of the first album, a lot of the last album and then a bit of a few songs in the middle.
Yeah.
Like of those, say if a band's got 5 albums, it would be like, let's take like 2 songs from the second album, 3 songs from the third album, and 2 songs from the fourth album.
Yeah.
And then play 5 or 6 songs off the new album, 5 or 6 songs off the first album, if that's the album that broke them into like singles and stuff.
Yeah. And if it's not the first album, it's whatever that fan favourite album is, that crossover album that got them where they are, in these bigger venues. It's whichever album did that, the new album, and then, like you said, they sort of cherry-pick songs in between. So it was really interesting that I played a lot of songs off Notes on Conditional Form, because that would be the album in that sort of concert meta that would have been left behind.
Yeah, and they've sort of done a good variation of tracks from a lot of the albums as well. But I know what you mean though, Peter. When you look at the track listing, Notes has a lot of songs on, as does the new album. Like we've got a pie chart here of songs of the albums. So it's 8 off Being Funny in a Foreign Language, 6 off Notes on a Conditional Form, 5 off A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships, 4 off the debut album, which I'm actually surprised it's that few.
It felt like more in the venue.
And then, obviously, we've got 3 off Like It When You Sleep. I'm not going to say the rest. And then 1 off 4, which I'm assuming is...
Falling For You.
Falling For You.
Which I would sort of lump into the first
debut
album.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you've got the expanded one, it is sort of in there on the track listing, isn't it? But yeah, that is surprising. I'd like to see the second album get a bit more representation, but in all fairness, the first few times we saw them, that was the album that was playing a lot off anyway.
Yeah, and I also think when they get to that, 10th anniversary in a couple of years, might be next year, I can't remember which year it came out. I feel like it came out in 2016, but it could have come out end of 2015. I reckon they'll tour that one a lot more. If they're touring, because they're on a touring hiatus, but we speculate based off what they're trying to say that it's going to be to go into the studio. So I think that they won't be on hiatus for like 5 years. I think they'll be on hiatus for maybe 2 years for touring, because, and that, as we were saying on the day, we was like, well, that may not include festivals. They may, you can have a touring hiatus and still play festivals. A lot of bands do. So it'll be interesting to see how they actually tackle that.
Yeah, and I am interested to see what they do on the next album. Like me and Peter speculated, do they go a little bit more unhinged and do an album more wild, like Notes on a Conditional Form? Do they look at Being Funny in a Foreign Language and say, we want to do that again because that was very well received and very good live? Or do they do something completely different? Because they are one of those bands where they can do anything.
My thoughts personally are, because of their catalogue and how they will often flip-flop from, being like super smooth to being like quite electronic focused to being like really authentic and stuff like that. Like, I think personally that the next album is going to be pretty much the opposite of Being Funny in a Foreign Language, but I think there will be songs, because they seem to always have these songs like If You're Too Shy and It's Not Living If You're Not With You, and basically like most of the new album, where they work for the fans and for radio as well. But I do think that, because if you take Notes on a Conditional Form as an example, and same really with A Brief Inquiry, I mean, to be honest, any of their albums, they'll have these, really, really solid sort of pop rock tunes that you really can't argue with. But then they'll have, songs like Petrichor or Bagsy Not In There, a lot of the more ambient electronic and experimental noodlings they do. They are the songs that, make them weirder, but also that's what makes them the 1975. And it's almost a shame that Being Funny in a Foreign Language, they probably felt like they needed to condense the album and not show that side of themselves to make a stronger album, because it's a stronger album, but ultimately when you compare it to their previous albums, you are just getting less.
And also you've got to remember that Jack Antonoff will have had his way of producing, and he might have said, for this album we don't want to use this technology and that technology. You know, he's very
Yeah.
big on only using analog synths, isn't he, Jack Antonoff?
Yeah,
So
and
they
he's
might
big
have
on
said,
capturing the room as well. So it's hard to capture the room if you're doing everything on machine.
he might have said, we want as little technology as possible. He might have just said to Matt Healy, no auto-tune, full stop.
Yeah.
No, I Like America or anything like that, or two time. And they'll have said, let's try and make like a classic sounding record. And the thing with being funny in a foreign language is there's really not a lot of elements in it that puts it in whichever year it came out, probably like
2022, I feel like, Mike.
There's not a lot of like very cutting edge technology that puts it in a particular year. You could listen to that album on vinyl in 10 years' time and assume it come out in a very different year if you was not into music and how music is recorded.
Because if you're going off the soul musicality of the album, then I would completely agree. You know, it could be placed in like songs like Oh Caroline could have come out in like the 80s. But what really, if you're really listening in, what tells you when it came out is the lyrics. The lyrical content really place it in the time frame. But I think sonically, it sort of sounds like it could have come out in the late 80s or early, maybe not early 90s. It just feels very late 80s, like 89, 88 sort of time to me.
But that's like what they seem to have done with like the way Jack Antonoff produces and then the way the songs have come together. It's very much, we want to use acoustic instruments, we want to use instruments in the room, and we don't want to be messing about with loads and loads of trippy sonic stuff. Now, I know you could say, well, in part of the band, there's loads of reversed vocals and faffing about and little studio trickery that isn't in the room, but a lot of the front and center elements is violins, it's pianos, it's their instruments that they're playing.
Also, I'd argue, though, in part of the band, they haven't really done anything the Beatles couldn't have done given the knowledge and time.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, that's the limitation of that project. Whereas it would be very interesting if they went, right, nothing's off limits. We can use any form of production we want to use. Because you can see whenever you see them live or in the studio, they're very big on using MPCs in 1975. They always have them live. They seem to rely on them live a lot. And it's something that even when they're doing songs like this new batch, you'll see them have NPCs that they're hitting here and there, even like on Change of Heart and stuff. And it makes you wonder what exactly is on some of the NPCs. Is it some of the atmosphere? Is it some of the retrigs? Obviously, they're great for retrigging vocals and stuff live. But, you know, it'd be very interesting to see what they do with just like you say, a bit like the Notes thing, where they can make absolutely anything, because they do seem to like a lot of different genres of music.
They proved to us that they have, you know, a wide net in which they can land in, because Notes on a Conditional Form, I think, I don't want to say it's polarising, but there was definitely people I knew that were less, you know, on board with what they were doing, because, you know, it's so out there. I mean, I remember us listening through it the first time being like, this is just like, for a quote-unquote, I know genre is dead, rock band, you know, it was pretty damn wild for like that 4-way batch of electronic sort of songs coming out at the end, which was really nice, because there's been so many bands like Muse who said, we're going to do a like full album of ambient electronic, then the rock album in a ambient electronic sandwich with 3 discs, and that, you know, the rock album comes out, but the 2 ambient electronic sort of sides of the sandwich just disappear. Yeah, so it was nice to actually hear them get into that electronic stuff.
You could describe tracks like Petrichor or How to Draw Petrichor, and like you said, the 4 tracks, including Bagsy Not in Net and stuff, they're the songs that get dropped by the label. They're the songs where the label goes, you've got a brand and this isn't there. And that's why it's really refreshing that the 1975 are on their own label, Dirty Hit, and they make the decisions. And this is why they're on their own label, because they have said in the past that when they were shopping around for labels, the label wanted them to be one thing. And they don't want to be one thing. They want to do whatever they want to do. So if there was on a label and they had somebody who's a little bit, you know, like more frugal with what they release, these are all the songs that you would never hear. All these sort of electronic ones and stuff. They'd say, we want you to do the sound 15 times, and some ballads, and that's it. That's all you're allowed to do. And in a sense, we already have that. We have lots and lots of 80s bops. Do you know what I mean? Like the sound.
It's like we were saying about being funny. The difference is being funny in a foreign language could have had 17 songs on, but it just doesn't, because they've cut, arguably, I know the songs may not have been there, but in the writing process, they just haven't wrote them songs that led to them having 22 songs on notes on a conditional form. And that's the way you've got to look at it. You know, I know people are like, well, just cut the weak songs and make a stronger album. Well, weak songs are hard to define because everybody connects with different music. So, you know, they could cut your favourite 8 songs off an 18-song album to get it to 10. That's the thing you've got to think about.
Look at what they're playing live. They don't have to play Bagsy Not In Net live. They don't have to play I Like America live, but I Like America is like a staple of the show now.
Yeah, it
as
is.
is Two Time. These aren't songs that you would expect them to play, and Two Time is not a song you'd expect to be a hit for them either.
Yeah, that's very true.
It is a hit, but a label who wants them to fit in a box would look at Two Time and go, you're not, you know, because Two Time, you know, has the, I can't remember which rhythm it is, but it's one of the Latin American rhythms that you hear on all the Latin tracks. It has that with the super poppy song that sounds like the 1975, but you could do Two Time. You could just change the vocal chain and change the drums, and it would sound very much like other 1975 songs. Those are the two defining factors that puts it in a completely different box.
Or it's the sort of song where if it was being handled by a label, they would have said, that's a great song to give to somebody else. That's how I feel like it would normally go.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. So, you know, these are the things to think about with your favourite bands. Luckily, we get a very unfiltered look at the 1975, and that's partly what drew me and Peter to them when we discovered them. Is listening to all this crazy production, you know, because we're suckers for interesting production, and it's those songs that are interesting that bring you in, and then you don't need them live, you know, but they are nice. And what's great about them is it shows you this is what they could do. And that's what I think so interesting about the 1975.
Yeah, so are you seeing the 1975 on this run of UK dates? And do you even know who they are? Because it astounds me when people don't know who they are.
Right, thanks for listening, everybody. This has been our thoughts on the brand new tour for the 1975. And like I say, let us know in the polls what you think, and see you next episode.